All right, hello everybody. So here we go. This is number 172, I think. Boy, we've been racking them up, huh? So I want to remind everybody that if you want to get a weekly notice about whether we will have the Q&A or not, in the description for this video is a WhatsApp address that you can click on and sign up to get WhatsApp messages. And I don't abuse this. I don't put anything on there except yes, we're gonna have it this week. No, we're gonna have it this not gonna have it this week. Oh, excuse me. And I put the link if we will have it. I don't use it for anything else. I can't promise that will never change, but it will only change if you guys indicate that you would like it to change. But for now, all it's for is to inform you when we're going to have a Q&A. And the reason why we have to do this is because YouTube decides who gets the notice, who doesn't get the notice. It's not, I don't know what their algorithms do, but not everybody gets the notice that we're having a Q&A. So this way you guys get the link and can be here when we have the Q&A. Also, I want to remind everybody that I don't do monetization during the live Q&A. I only turn that on when we use the word on YouTube monetization. That's the advertising, right? I turn advertising off until after we're finished. Then I try to remember to go straight on there and set it to advertising. And that's as a courtesy to you guys that are going to be here live, okay? So news. What's new this week? The books did come in. Let me grab one so you guys can see it. So I got a number of these. Now, I'm going to remind you, I don't know why I'm telling you guys this, right? We don't sell physical books at our website. So these are for my students. They're for friends that I might, share them with and stuff like that. And also when we go to conventions and stuff like that, which we don't do a lot of. That's why I didn't get a lot of them. But the reason I guess the reason why I'm showing these to you is because I want you to see that the book is very nice on the coil bound. If you buy it from Lulu instead of Amazon, now I don't have a problem wherever people want to buy it. I'm happy, right? But the coil bound is only available, and it's not. This is not my doing. If we could do coil bound on Amazon, we would do that. It's just not allowed. And you can imagine why. You know what? When I got this morning, it came in the mail today. A bunch of these were stuck to each other at the end. So I can imagine why Amazon wouldn't want to do that, right? So, but it's been available on Amazon for a few weeks. If you look for Trumpet Christmas Duets Coil Bound on Google, this book will come up. Okay, so that's the big news. Um, we've been working on the next duet book, believe it or not. That'll be the fourth book for the year. Working on the next duet book, which is the Trumpet Player Duets. And I thought we would be done by now, but there's been interruptions. So I think that's all the news. And I would also like to, if you're in the area, you want to go to a outdoor concert. We have an outdoor concert every Tuesday night in Galveston in front of the Rosenberg Library. So anyway, very good. So anybody got some questions? I have 2 questions written down here somewhere that people have asked, and if we don't get any questions, I'll sneak these in. And when I look up there, it's to see how many people are here. So yes, if we don't get a question in the next couple minutes, I'll go ahead and start answering these 2. One of them I already answered, but it came up not in my website or anything like that, but on somebody else's. Someone had recorded. In fact, I'll tell you the name. Brian Fincher had recorded one of my etudes, actually all 3 etudes, but I was on one of the videos. And the question came up on his in the comments about one of the notes. And I had already answered this in this Q and A, I think a few weeks ago. Hello, Karen. Nice to see you. And it had to do with accidentals and whether or not they apply to octaves. And you know what I did this time? Because originally what I told them I would do is find it in my Q and A, cut a clip. Hello, Raimo. Cut a clip from that and post that as a separate video and then give them a link. But I realized when I listened to it, I wasn't very clear about my answer. And I do that sometimes. I'm not as bad as I used to, but I know what I'm thinking. I don't always assume other people know what I'm thinking. So, uh, so anyway, I would like to cover that in more detail, talking about accidentals that cover octaves. And maybe I'll make a clip out of that later in the week. And the other one is about playing loud, believe it or not. So, all right. So since I've practically introduced it already, let's talk about the accidentals. And if I hope this isn't boring for those of you who have already watched me talk about this. And instead of being specific about it, because last time I was specific, and maybe that's why I wasn't as convincing to me when I watched it again, is because I was being specific to that, and I answered the question, which was, is that note a B flat or a B natural? So let's clarify what we're talking about. In music, in sheet music, if a accidental is placed on a note in one octave, does it apply to all other octaves? And the point I made was that it comes down to common practice. And common practice changes. And I did some research on this after I figured out that my answer was not very complete. And in this research, I dug up some people, people can be so rigid. And it's my experience that when people are that rigid when it comes to cultural rules, they're not looking at the big picture. They only see what's right there in front of them. And you know, what I'm responding to right now is someone that actually agrees with me, but agrees with me for the wrong reason. They think that's the rule and therefore you should follow it, and everything else is wrong. But the problem with that is that music wasn't always done this way. So let's state right now, what is the rule? The rule is that the accidental on modern music only applies to the octave that it was written in. So if you have a B natural in this octave and then the music goes up an octave, that note up there, if the key signature has B flat, that note in the other octave is B flat. And that is modern practice, common practice. That's modern common practice. And my argument in the previous time we talked about this was that finale, I didn't even mention the name finale. That's the other thing. Finale is sort of like the authority on music notation right now. The people who design Finale, by the way, Finale is music writing software. I've been using Finale since 93, 92, somewhere around there. Somewhere around there. Never stopped using Finale. I know people that got frustrated with it and quit and went for some easier software. I don't think it's easier. Any new software that you learn is going to be harder than what you already know. So anyway, yeah, so Finale is music writing software. It's the industry standard software. And what we have in Finale is a playback feature. And the people in Finale invest so much, this is their career. And you can pretty much trust that if you do playback on Finale and the note is B natural in this octave and B flat in that octave, you now know that that's the industry standard common practice. That's my argument I was trying to make earlier that I did so poorly on. But if the software that's top industry standard software is running it that way, if that's the convention they use, that is the convention. That is common practice. Whether you like it or not, that's how it is. You would have to reprogram somehow. And maybe they have an options thing, because I know there are some people that are so stuck on the rules that they think that the accidentals carry to all octaves. Because at one time, that's how it was. But common practice does change. You know, an example of common practice changing is it used to be, at least in the jazz community, it used to be that the key signature was only written once per page until you had a key change, and then you would have another key signature. But if it was just one key on the whole page, you would only have the key signature at the top of the page. That has changed. Why? Because that old jazz music was written by hand. And it was written quickly because you had to pay somebody to sit and write that out. In the old days, they would use, that's the difference between classical music and jazz back in those days. Jazz was, I think it's called lithograph or something like that. And it's basically done like a, what do you call it? What the architects use. I forgot what that's called. But it's done on that same paper on the same machines in the old days. And so it made sense. Every new piece of information added to the music costs money because you're paying a real person to do it. Well, now with computerized music, you can have an accidental, I mean, a key signature on every line, and it takes no effort, no time. It's all automatic. So that's another change in common practice. Now, why did we have key signatures on every page? I mean, on every line on the page in classical music? Because that music was engraved. And you could have the same argument, except that the engraving process was already so laborious. I think it was um, not that big of a deal to add. And they would print from those plates over and over and over again. And I know you could make the arguments the same in the jazz, but that's my theory about why it was different. Today, there's no reason for it to be different. Today, you have to reprogram finale to take that key signature out of there. And I've seen people do this because the old way is right. Unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Why would you make your music sound worse? Because inevitably, people are going to screw it up and make your chart sound bad. Why would you, on purpose, take the key signature off of the other lines? That makes absolute no sense to me. Anyway, so when we're talking about um, common practice does change. If that weren't that way, then we would still be using four staff lines, or we'd be using six staff lines. We'd be still using these weird time signatures. We would still be using just one flat or no flats at all for key signatures. Common practice does change. So someone who's going to take music seriously should actually be taking common practice seriously. Anyway, I know I'm going on about this, but this is a real thing. Now, I think it's wrong. However, this is the flip side of this. There, I discovered when I did the research on this that there are actually some really weird, uh, overly, we would call them in the Christian community legalists. There are some weird musical legalists that think that the reason why you should only apply the accidental to one octave is because that's the rule. No, that's not the rule. That's common practice today. And why is that important? Is because music 60 years ago used the other rule. You need to know that when you're playing music of different periods. When you're reading music that was published, okay, I said 50 years ago, it's more like 70 years ago now. I have a bad habit of doing that, living 20 years behind. So, yeah, 70 years ago, up to 70 years ago, the common practice was that an accidental in one octave carried over to all octaves. That's not true today. That is not common practice today. And my evidence of that, I'll say it one more time, that my evidence of that is when you look at finale. Now, I don't know, I have on my computer, I've got the one that everybody uses for free, MuseScore, and I don't even think it's free anymore. I've got a free version of MuseScore. I've got um, a few. I got Little Lily Pond. I would have loved to have spent some time on that, but what else? I also have one from Crescendo Music Notation, which I would love to dive into more. That's by the same company that I use for my video editing and stuff like that. I would love to dive into that. But my point is that I don't know what their defaults are. I'm assuming the defaults on those programs are the same as Finale defaults because, like I said, finale is industry standard. So I would be extremely surprised to find out that MuseScore, for some reason, plays. If you put a natural in this octave, the playback will make it natural in all octaves. I would be extremely surprised. So yes, common practice is now. Another thing I wanted to say about this is that people should not be ashamed or embarrassed that they didn't know this, because in a lot of the universities, the the old convention is still being taught, that it applies to all octaves. So you can't be blamed for that, for not knowing that. There is still some old dogma. We could call it dogma. You can, if it's something that has already changed, but you're still believing the old way, that's dogma. In my opinion, that's dogma. So musical dogma is still dogma. So you can't blame yourself for that if that's all you ever knew. And there is a uncertain time period. Now, I think the best way you can determine when during that time period when it was uncertain, the best way you can determine what the convention is for this piece of music you're playing right now is whether or not it's computer generated. And that's pretty obvious. It's even the stuff that's uh, uh, done in the plates, you know, typeset or whatever. Uh, that stuff has a certain uh, inconsistency from one note to the next. If you look at the music and it's the notes are identical, all the eighth notes look the same, all the quarter notes look the same, then you can pretty much be sure that the notes and the other octaves are not, do not apply that accidental. I hope that makes it clear. So, but yes, I want to say it one more time. Music from the old days applied. So, like your Arbin book, for example, and we've talked about the the music worship. We've talked about trumpet worship and how some people call the Arbin book the trumpeter's Bible. We've talked about that before, and you can imagine if you are a participant in this trumpet religion, trumpet worship religion, and the Arbin is written. That now I haven't looked at the Arbin. I don't know that the octaves carry the accidental through. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. But if, let's say hypothetically, that you're one of those people that worships the trumpet Bible, and I say that almost sarcastically, there really are some people that flat out worship the trumpet Bible. It's not just a ism for them. It's not just funny. They actually do worship in the sense that it's the most important book out there. Does that make sense? So, um, so you can imagine if you are a trumpet worshiper and the trumpet Bible says that accidentals in one octave apply to other octaves, you can see how that kind of dogma would take hold. You can see how that can happen, the mechanism by which that kind of thing could happen. Because then it becomes a belief, and your whole belief is wrapped up in trumpet stuff. So, so yes, I I'm going to summarize it. I know I already started summarizing. I'm going to summarize it. It has to be common practice. You have to go according to common practice. And it's got to be common practice according to when the music was written. So when you're playing 100-year-old music that hasn't been re-entered into a computer, stuff that was printed 100 years ago, then the other convention probably applies, and it applies to other octaves. But modern music that's done on the computers doesn't follow that convention. Okay? Please feel free to ask any questions while I'm going on about this stuff. Okay, so let me scratch this off my list and get some dopamine. Whew, one hit of dopamine coming up. The other one is, what's wrong with playing loud? What's wrong with playing loud? And you know what? Before I get into this, let me give you tell you about a experience I had. A friend of mine, Carol Morgan, was featured in San Antonio for the trumpet convention, and I wanted to be in the front row. And the trumpet convention has trumpet fanfares that can be anywhere from 4 to, I don't know, 20. I don't think there's a limit. And there was a trumpet ensemble doing a fanfare before Carol's show started. She was the last show of the night, and I'm in the front row. This was the loudest music I had ever heard in my whole life. It got so loud at one point. I was actually very, very concerned because at one point I stopped hearing the music, and I don't know if this was mental, because there are some mental things that happen between the ear itself and the mind. I don't know if it was mental or if it was physical, but what I heard when the music cut out sounded like it was coming from an ARP Odyssey synthesizer. This is the pre-MIDI synthesizer where they have the little patch cords that they plug in and stuff like that. It sounded like something from a sci-fi movie from the 80s. They didn't stop playing. They weren't making those sounds. Inside my head, that's what I heard, and I was extremely, extremely concerned that I had popped an eardrum or something. And I don't want to talk badly about anybody. So that's why I'm not mentioning. I don't even remember who it was, so I couldn't tell you. I can't tell you what ensemble played. But the thing is, you could tell they were actually quite proud of the fact that they could play that loud. Um, and to me, it was a disgusting performance. I'm sorry. It was a truly disgusting performance. Not just because of what happened to my ears. You know, my ears rang after that for a week and a half. I've been to rock concerts that were not that loud. And if you ever find yourself in a position that you are proud that you could on a acoustic trumpet, that you are proud that you could play that loud, I want to invite you to take a step back and ask, what is it you're doing? Why are you doing that? What is it that you're proud of? That's not music. And so what we're going to talk about today, because it did come up, um, what's wrong with that? And I'm going to limit. There are other things besides what I'm talking about. The main point that I'm going to share with you right now. But there are other things besides this. But I'm just right now. I'm just going to keep it to the musical stuff. The problem with playing too loud. Okay, so I would like to change this to playing too loud. And yes, I do believe that my definition of too loud applies to those kids that were performing. What does too loud mean? Is when you play so loud that you can no longer phrase and you can no longer give note shape to the notes. Phrasing and note shape, this is, it's not, phrasing and note shape is not only about volume, but a huge part of phrasing and a huge part of note shape, which I call style. When I personally use the word style, I'm talking about note shape and vibrato and stuff like that. But note shape is the most important part of style. And note shape is a a volume thing. And if you're playing too loud is when you play so loud that you can no longer phrase, you can no longer note shape, because here's your your volume limit, and you're pushing up against that ceiling. You can no longer play higher than louder than that. So everything you play comes out flat. There is no phrasing, there is no style. Aside, let's not even talk about that it sounds terrible. Let's not even talk about that, because there are things that happen that kick in when you push to the top of your volume. There are things that kick in that make you sound terrible. Playing loud is not in and of itself an admirable thing. Never has been. But let's ignore that for now. Um, what am I talking about? So, you know, in a way, we can blame modern technology, because there's a feature that they use when you're recording called compression. So if the way you hear music is from the modern recordings, there's a certain aspect of dynamics and note shape that you're not going to get, because there's compression. What is compression? Compression is when they digitally bring the top volume down and digitally bring the bottom volume up, so that everything is within this narrow band. And compression makes sense when you're doing layers of recording. You record the rhythm section first, then you do the trombones, then you do the whatever, what that we call that layering. When you do layering, it's a lot easier to make it work when you compress everybody and you make their volume in one narrow band. And if that's all you're hearing when you're listening to music, then you don't know what living music sounds like. And by the way, that's I use well, I just said the word living, right? I don't remember how the heartbeat looks. It's something like this, right? And it's very interesting to me, because if you look at a good recording, it often resembles a heartbeat. But what these people do when you play as loud as you can possibly play, what you have instead of something that has a heartbeat, you have something that is flat. This is what I mean by flat. And I'm trying to fill it in a way that would look like on the computer. When you play as loud as you can, that's what you get. And I like to tell people, if something is flat, it's not alive, because of this analogy uh, or metaphor. I always get those two mixed up. this comparison to the heartbeat. If it doesn't come up and down in volume on the note level and on the phrase level, it's not alive. It's just notes. That's what's wrong with playing too loud. When you hit that level, and then everything is at that volume, it's not alive. It's just notes at that point. That's what's wrong with playing too loud. Now, in the orchestras, one of the things that they train for is to be able to produce more volume, but still have the shape, still have the the um the phrasing, still have the note shape. But that takes years and years and years of training. The rule is, at least when I was training for orchestra stuff, the rule is you never go past in volume what you can continue to play musically. Then that also applies to sound. It applies to playing in tune. It's harder to play in tune when you're playing so loud. So the rule is when you're learning how to play loud, you never go past what you can still play musically. Now, here's part of the problem with today's students is that the teachers themselves don't know about this. I can't, this is not a blanket statement over all teachers. I'm not saying that. This is not a blanket statement. I'm not condemning all teachers. Some probably do. I have seen, and so that makes this anecdotal. I understand that. I have seen teachers that teach their students to play. I call this ba 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 ba, right? So if they're doing Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, ba 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 ba, right? It's there's no shape to that, whether it's loud or soft. There's no shape to the overall line. There's no shape to the individual notes. And for those people who have been trained to play music, to play real music, this is atrocious. And I've heard, and it happens in jazz too, by the way. But the difference is in jazz, we're talking more about swing. And so, how can you have in swing, right? In swing, you've got certain notes that are accented, certain notes that are not accented. Then we have ghost notes. How can you have that and it's all at the same volume? It's not going to happen. In jazz, certain notes pop out. You cannot get a truly jazz sounding swing if everything's at the same volume. You know, even the computers now have playback that's more, they call it human playback. And a lot of what they're doing is they're adding these note shapes and phrase shapes and all that stuff to make it sound more human. And yet, the actual schools are not teaching this human stuff. Okay? It's amazing to me. It really is amazing. So, yes, it's not good. Now I understand that sometimes the band plays loud and you have to play loud enough um, to match them. Let me tell you how I feel about that. Um, I would just rather not play with that band. And I know if that's the only option you have, then you have to consider. I'm not suggesting that anybody else should take this attitude that I'm taking. Now, that said, if I'm getting paid for that, then I'll just put my earplugs in and do the job. I think, the way people think is always in narrow patterns. So when I complain about the volume, I think they think I'm complaining for the same reasons that other people complain about the volume. But the reason I'm complaining about the volume is because it makes me sound ba 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 ba, and I don't like to sound that way. I it's like sticking a stake through my heart to sound like that. It sounds awful. The last time I played in a big band that they were playing like this, I, what joy do I get out of that? And I won't mention what band that is. But yeah, if you play so loud that there's no shape, there's no phrasing, there's no shape to the notes, it's not nice. It's just a bunch of notes. You, you can't even put vibrato on that. You can't even. There's not. What are you gonna do with that? So yeah, they think. I don't know what they think. That I'm just complaining. I don't want to hurt my ears, which that's partly true, but that's not it. I hate being forced to play. I know this is around. Nobody's asking any questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and elaborate on some of this. I get so many comments about my sound and how the way I play on my YouTube videos touches people's hearts and stuff like that. I get so many comments. Not all of them are public, but there are some that are public. But I get a lot of that, and I think what they're hearing, what people are accessing, what they're perceiving from me, from my playing, is this heartbeat in my music. They are hearing a live person on the other side, not someone that's just pushing buttons like a car honking, right? They're actually getting that heartbeat that I'm talking about. The music sounds alive. You know, there are I my my first 50 hymn recordings were just not an afterthought, more like a forethought. They were a first fruits offering. Whenever I sat down to record something, I would record a hymn first. Then the next day I would record another one, and so on. And I ended up publishing these. I did not think anybody would listen to them. But now, today, I just checked yesterday, I got this week alone 24,000 streams on Spotify just this week. It's been as high as like I think 32 or something like that. 32,000 streams on Spotify alone, and 90% of it is those hymns. What are they responding to? Is it because they like the hymns? Yes, they like the hymns. Um, but more importantly, when I play those hymns, and I'm not bragging, don't get me wrong. I'm not bragging. I'm using this as an example of what I'm talking about. When I play those hymns have this heartbeat that I'm talking about. If I were to do a screenshot of my recording software of how I'm playing the hymns, you would see something that kind of sort of resembles a heartbeat. I have spent, I think it was, it almost has to be my time at UTEP that taught me this. It almost has to be. It was, in fact, by the time I moved to Houston, my desire to make music like that was so strong that my next teacher had to tell me, hey, chill out on that. Don't be so musical on this. And he was right in that context. Another example, I remember playing a brass quintet gig, and one of the things that this brass quintet leader does is he'll take some easy music that was written for children, but that way he's got the music and we can do with it what we want in the performance, patriotic stuff and stuff like that. And we were on a, yeah, I think it was a, not an anniversary. What's that dinner that they do the night before the wedding? Um, anyway, it was one of those. It was a wedding, but the night before, and we played one of the brass quintet pieces that was like written for children, and the guy who hired me, his name's Daryl. He said that's why I like to hire Eddie. He takes whatever it is that we play, and he makes it sound like music. One of the best compliments I ever got in my whole life. And that's, that was in the early 90s, I think. But that compliment pretty much characterizes how I see music. If you're just playing notes, you're not playing music. Rehearsal dinner, yes. Hello, John. Yeah, the rehearsal dinner. They hired a brass quintet for the rehearsal dinner, and yeah, the leader stopped and said, that's why we hire Eddie Lewis. You make it sound like something. And you can't do that. I'm sorry, you can't do that when you're playing at your full volume. Full volume. Let me draw another chart here. And this chart's going to have a line where your hypothetic full volume is, hypothetic lowest volume, and then how I'm going to only show phrasing right now. If you have a loud phrase, maybe your starting point might be about the 2/3 level of your full volume. So I'm gonna write a phrase. This is what your phrase should look like. It's marked. The whole section is marked fortissimo. And unless your trumpet playing is supposed to be, unless your trumpet playing is supposed to be an effect, which sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just have one note, and that note is supposed to be just loud. But if you're playing a melody, that's what a fortissimo melody should look like. It starts around here, and then it goes to your full volume, and then comes back down. And the same could be applied to note shape. Let's say you do have a whole note that's just meant to be the clobber people in the face. Here's your full volume. Here's your lowest volume. and there's the note. It's got an accent on it, so there's the accent right there. The accent does not go over your full volume. The rest of the note is at about 1/4, I'm sorry, 4/4 or 2/3 of your full volume. It should not be. It's a whole note. You're holding it for 4 beats. It should not be your full volume for 4 beats. That's disgusting. Unless the person who composed the music specifically is asking for some disgusting loud trumpet, that's not how you play. The way you play is like this. You hit the note with your full volume and then you come back off of it. That's a fortissimo whole note with an accent on it. You should never play at your full volume. Now, what I'm talking about is what it takes to be musical. I understand that there are situations where you cannot be musical because the conductor is telling you that he wants this disgusting stuff. And I'm sorry for your, I feel sorry for you. I've been there myself. Personally, unless I'm getting paid, I don't want to, have anything to do with that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm too old. I'm too old to subject myself to that. Well, not especially now because of YouTube, right? I can play my own stuff and I can make it sound musical. And, you know, why do I need to go play ugly stuff like that? I don't need to do that. I hope that makes sense. Wow, no questions other than what we had before I stopped. I mean, before I started. Are there any questions we can cram in at the end here? Let me throw this stuff out. Oh, I missed. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great weekend. That was just 2 questions in 1 hour. That's funny for someone that's not really much of a talker, isn't it? Any questions? Karen says, not much of a question, but I always have a pressure ring on my top lip, never my bottom lip. Is that normal? Yes, that's normal. Now, I did watch a video that one of my students wanted me to watch of David Hickman talking about pressure, that the best players, um, they had some way to measure the pressure on the top and the pressure on the bottom. Um, I'm not a big fan of that kind of, I guess you could call it research. I'm not a big fan of that because we can't really know how we're applying that live. It's a nice academic thing, right? It's good to know, but how does that help me? Right? That's what I mean. That's good to know, but how does that help? I found myself, even though my attitude is uh, what it is when it comes to research like that, my attitude, eh, because we don't really know what to do with that information. And yet I still found myself experimenting with pushing a little bit more on the bottom lip. And it just reminded me of I'm not going to call it a rule, but I have something I like to say. It's an ism. All physical work should be for musical reasons. And to arbitrarily just push more on the bottom lip, it's so much more complicated than that. There's a reason why we push on the top lip. Now, I think the best thing you can do with that kind of information is just be a little bit more aware. But yeah, I'm not so sure that kind of information is very helpful. The bottom line is most people push harder on the top lip than the bottom lip. And you know what? I would have been more impressed with that research if he had distinguished between upstream players and downstream players. I would be more impressed with it if that had been taken into account. Now, I don't think I saw everything he had presented on that issue. Um, but yeah, I don't. When we start getting into stuff like that, I start to become suspicious. And don't get me wrong, you guys know I don't badmouth anybody. But you know what the weird thing is today? If you don't agree with people today, they think you're badmouthing them. I'm sorry, though, that's not how the world works. Different people have different ideas. It's the differences. What's funny is that people talk about these differences like they're so valuable, but you're not allowed to have any. Yeah, in our society today, people are so bent out of shape. If I don't agree with some famous guy about trumpet, then I'm a bad person. It's ridiculous. This is how we got where we are, not through conformity, but through people uh, questioning each other. That's how progress is made. Someone comes up with a great idea and everybody else criticizes it. That's how you get progress. You find all of the flaws. Yes, we need to have great ideas. But if all you ever do is let people be creative, nothing ever comes of it. Something has to be applied to filter all of the negative stuff out of that great idea. So, yeah, so with this thing, with the pressure on the bottom lip, like I said, it's good to know. And I'm not refuting the results. I'm not refuting the results. I will refute the application of those results to suggest that now people should push harder on the bottom lip. I can't go with that. All physical work or all physical changes for that matter, should be done for musical reasons. Now, you could say, well, I get a better tone if I do that. Well, there's more to life than just tone. What about your flexibility? What about your endurance? What about note shape? What about phrasing? There's so much involved besides just tone. So yes, I just can't agree with that. I just can't do that. Anyway, we've got one more minute. Great to hang out with you guys today. JK, hello JK. What's more important, uh, sound or technique? So when I rank things, to me, expression is at the top. Neither one of those is at the top. I put expression first. Expression first. A lot of people that blows their mind because most people, and once again, you can't blame them because this is the environment that we're brought up in. Most people, expression is never even on the table. I'm talking about students. Nobody ever talks about expression. They talk about sound. They talk about tone. And like what we're talking about here, technique. So I would put expression at the top. I would put sound just beneath expression. We do want to get the best sound that we can get. Here's why I put expression above sound, is because sometimes in order to express fully, you have to push in a way that maybe the sound will be slightly compromised. I'm not saying we play to a point where we get the blatty sound from playing too loud. I'm not talking about that. But it is possible to be so protective over your sound that you don't even let nuances come out. And there's a lot of trumpet players in the modern trumpet community today who are so sound centric that they avoid the nuances because you only get your best sound in that narrow band. It's almost as bad as playing too loud, almost, except that it doesn't sound terrible. Playing too loud does sound terrible. So playing too loud has no heartbeat and it sounds terrible. Playing with a ultra pure sound also has no heartbeat. So sometimes we want to have nuances in the sound. And sometimes that means the sound falls out of that narrow band in the center. And yes, the sound, people get bent out of shape when I say this, but it applies just as well to the soft side as it does to the loud side. We want to continually practice playing soft so that we can get greater nuances on the soft side of the horn. But the same applies to the loud side. We want to be able to play loud enough that it's expressive. And yes, the sound is going to be just a little bit less when you're playing louder. But you're going to have now a heartbeat in that music. So yes, expression is first, sound is second. And then I would, if we're only talking about those three, I would put technique third. There's other stuff besides. So yes, I do think now sometimes you have to put sound first because that's the environment that you're in. And if you want to win the audition, or if you want to um, uh, get a job or win an award or whatever, you will have to play their game. And if all of the judges are sound centric, um, let me put it this way. You could be extremely expressive. If they are sound centric and expression isn't even on their radar, if you don't have a good sound too, you won't win. And see, that's where I differ from a lot of other teachers, is I actually value a student that has a bad sound but great expression. Now, okay, let me reword that. I almost said I value one student over another student. That's not what I mean. I value the music of one student over the music of another student. Okay, so let's not make it personal. But if I hear a recording where it's great expression, maybe not so great of a sound, I would much prefer to hear that than to hear someone that's got a great sound and no expression. That's just me. But and what that means, so when I'm teaching a student that has to audition, I still put expression first. But I make it clear to them that the trumpet community today is sound-centric. So they need to have their sound at a high level. Expression is still more important, but that sound better be there. Because we do live in a sound-centric trumpet community. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, very good. Thanks for hanging out. God bless you guys, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend.